Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Welcome in to the GSMC Football Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. It is your host, Brice Lewis, back again to discuss everything football with you today. You know what we're going to do here on the show. We're going to get to some quarterback talk. We're going to talk about Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson and coming off that amazing Monday night game we saw. And it's the classic between two young quarterbacks. And I'm going to discuss their futures on the podcast today. I'm also going to get into our usual Week 15 predictions as we're getting down to the home stretch, the last few games of the season. So I'm going to give all my predictions on that. Obviously, the playoff race is heating up, so we're going to give the update on the playoff race as well. We're going to give more update on the college football playoff today in college, as there's been discussions about potentially flipping Ohio State with Texas A&M. So we're going to discuss that, plus also talk about the biggest games of the week, which are the championship games that we have this week, and then other NFL news if we can get to it. So, like I said, once again, thank you for tuning in once again and letting me be a part of your day. But let's go ahead and jump right into it. And so, like I said, we came off that amazing Monday night game where the Ravens beat the Cleveland Browns 47-42. It was an offensive fireworks show. You know, we got Lamar Jackson cramping up, coming back from the cramps, going back on the field, even though a lot of people feel like the way he was running, it looked like he more of a bathroom break than anything. But came back from his cramps and, you know, came back and won the game for Baltimore and really helped their playoff chances. And now they're tied with Miami for the last spot in the playoffs. They just only have I think they're one game behind in conference record, which is why they don't have the tiebreaker on Miami. But you could say they're very well set up to win out because they have the easier schedule than Miami does to end the season. But, you know, one person I want to talk about before we get into Lamar too much is Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield, obviously with Lamar Jackson having the game he had, the heroics that he had, the coming out of the locker room, that's where all the focus went. But we can't underestimate, and we can't just sit here and act like Baker Mayfield did not ball out for a second straight week in a row. He balled out in this game. He made big plays. He made good throws. Like I said, he had a mistake, but you know he made it up. He led 3 scoring drives in the fourth quarter. You know he was a very big catalyst, a part of what they did and why they did what they did. And you know some people are wondering, is this Baker Mayfield turning a new leaf? Is this Baker Mayfield now becoming the quarterback that when Cleveland drafted him they expected him to be? Is this the Baker we saw at the end of his rookie year? Because remember, Baker has been up and down a lot this year. And now he's been better. I mean, in the last 5-6 weeks, he's been better. We look at those games that he had against Washington and them and think, oh, they won those games 10-7, 17-13. Think, oh, he hasn't really done that much. But one thing Baker Mayfield that's been plaguing him throughout his early part of his career is turnovers. And that's something that Baker really has not done like he did last year at the beginning of this year, is turn the ball over. So yeah, he never really have not had the numbers in terms of touchdowns at the beginning of it, but he never also put the team in harm's way with turnovers, and that was one thing that really plagued Baker. That's why people were very much questioning if Baker could even be the quarterback. Is he even going to be the quarterback in Cleveland next year? Remember, we don't know if Cleveland's going to pick up Baker's fifth-year option. We don't know yet. And if they don't, you know, is that them saying that we're going to move on from Baker Mayfield? Because if not, they're going to have to pay Baker Mayfield. And I don't know, based off his career, you can sit here and justify paying Baker top quarterback money. I think Baker's going to be one of the guys who gets an extension and doesn't get top quarterback money. He's going to get $30 million, which is like, you would still think that's a lot of money, but in terms of what quarterbacks are getting paid now, he may be the 10th, 11th highest paid quarterback, which is, you know, where Cleveland probably might see him with the money. And so, you know, I think it's the maturation process. You know, Kevin Stefanski has been a blessing in disguise for this team. Last year, Freddie Kitchens just was not a guy who was ready to take on the role of having a team with a lot of personalities, basically being a alpha male in that locker room and saying, this is how we're going to do things, this is why we're going to do it, and this is what's going to work for us, and that's how we're going to be successful. Kevin Stefanski came in there, established himself immediately amongst the players, and gave them somebody they could sit here and buy into. I feel like a lot of players did not buy into Freddie Kitchens. A lot of people bought into Kevin Stefanski, and that's why he's gotten the most out of his guys. Because he's not a guy who's going to sit here and try to think he's somebody. He's not. Literally, they know what they are. They're a running football team who improved their offensive line to run the ball, which also has improved in the pass blocking game, which has also helped Baker Mayfield. Now, we can talk about defensively, their weaknesses, their back end. I didn't know this, but nobody on their back end is getting paid more than $5 million. So that basically means they have no money tied up in their back end. Because remember, there's rookies getting paid more than that. And remember, Cleveland has spent a lot of money on the offensive side of the ball to help Baker Mayfield, which is, we can sit here and say, yeah, that's one reason why Baker's been playing better. It's just all the weapons he has is really coming to actually show because he's not turning the ball over and he's making good throws. But that's a big part of it. Now, to me, I feel like definitely they're going to try to probably move Odell this offseason. If I'm Cleveland and I try to move Odell, I'm trying to get maybe a defensive back. I'm not saying a superstar potentially, but a guy who can start for you. You just need somebody better than what you have. So anybody who may be willing to get off of maybe defensive back potentially, I could also see maybe going after Richard Sherman, since he said he's probably not going to resign with the 49ers and try to get their secondary back up and ready again. Because that's going to be what keeps them from really doing anything of substance this year in the playoffs, unless offensively they just outscore teams. And so I think Baker has established himself. I think Baker has done better, and I think that's what we needed to see, is just the progress. Now we can kind of sit here and say, okay, if he keeps this up and he continues to play well moving forward, Cleveland can sit here and say, okay, we kind of have our guy for now. Because people still feel like this isn't a guy that you're saying 10 years he'll be here. This is a guy right now where it's like, okay, we can hang on to him right now. He's playing better. It's almost like in these situations with a Baker or young quarterbacks, you always just want to see, are you getting better? Where you're making us say, well, he's getting better, so let's stick with him. The thing is that if it feels like you're getting worse, or it feels like you are basically where you are, which isn't good, then that's when teams will sit here and say, okay, it may be time for us to move off of this guy. And that's where Baker kind of was after last year and then starting of this year. But his improvement and his growth has really, been shown, I think, in these last couple of games. And I think now it's making Cleveland say, okay, we may be able to keep him for another year. We don't have to move him, instantly. We can kind of just keep him around and just be like, okay, we can work with this. We can do something with this. And we don't have anything we have to worry about moving forward. So, if I'm Cleveland, you're really ecstatic about how Baker has played recently. And you just hope that he can continue this and keep this up moving forward. So it makes it like the investment that you have put around him will be worth it. And then also, it'll make you, when that time comes where you have to make that investment in him now, it'll make that decision easier for you to make. And if we talk about Lamar Jackson, Lamar, a lot of people, he had a down year. He's had a down year this year. He hasn't looked as good as he did during his MVP season, his second year, which is his first full year in the NFL. And so people are wondering, has Lamar Jackson hit his ceiling? Has he regressed? Is this what he is? And then we saw the Cleveland game, and it's like, well, this is what we saw last year. Now, we do have to point out, in the first almost 3 quarters, he only had 6 completions and 80 yards. So he really didn't come alive till late in that crazy fourth quarter. But I think Lamar still has that playmaking ability, and he has the ability to do things that other people can't. And I want to say that's why he, to me, will always have a chance to be a good starter in this league. Because he does have a special talent, something that makes him special. Every quarterback that's great or very good in this league has something special. Josh Allen has a big arm. has probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest arm in the league. You can decide him or Mahomes. And then he also is a guy who's 6'5", who can now run just as fast as a linebacker or a corner. Those are traits that will make him a very viable quarterback. His biggest thing with most big arm quarterbacks is accuracy, and he's improved that this year. And so that's what makes him special. Kyler Murray, he's a very accurate quarterback, has good arm strength, but what makes him special is his running ability, because Kyler Murray can basically outrun entire defenses. He's extremely slick. It's hard to get a hand on him, and his playmaking ability is what makes him special. You know, and Russell Wilson, his leadership and his ability to extend plays makes him special. And so Lamar has that more of a Kyler Murray-esque ability, even though I think most people would agree Kyler Murray is the better passer than Lamar Jackson. But Lamar is only in his second full year starting. And we have yet to sit here and put a ceiling on Lamar. I know a lot of people are saying the offense they're running has a ceiling because they've adjusted the playbook to fit him. So now, to fit him like earlier in his career, and now that he's developed and he's gotten better and he's, you know, and defenses are starting to catch up, now what is Greg Roman and that offense going to be? How are they going to transform? What are they going to do? Because the perception is you can't keep doing this and then think you're still going to have that exact same success later. And so, well, it'll be interesting to see Lamar Jackson's maturation process. Because I still think he can be a very good quarterback in this league. I mean, you don't win MVP because you're bad. You have to have some type of talent to win MVP. Even if the quarterback's not an MVP player year after year, he's probably still a good player. You know, when Matt Ryan won it, we know he's not in a... People have always wondered, especially earlier in his career, if he was an elite quarterback or not, or was he just at that border? But then he had an MVP, and he's a good quarterback. And that's why, all it takes is that good quarterback getting the right situation, right team, right coaching, and then they can explode and have that Mount Monster season. Like I said, you have to be good to do that. So we don't need to sit here and make it seem like Lamar Jackson isn't good, because he is good. He just has things, of course, he needs to still work on. He acknowledges it. He always tries to work on it, and that's honestly all you want from a guy like that. Are you willing to work on your game so you can be better, so you can help the team be better? That's going to be the biggest thing moving forward with Lamar Jackson, which I think he shows that work ethic and desire to do. And that's why we shouldn't sit here and judge Lamar based off his season. Because remember, second full year, tape on him, you know what I'm saying? Tape on the offense. Teams are like, okay, so this is what they like to do. Let's try to, change some things, do something different, see how we attack it. And then now it's up to Greg Roman and Lamar Jackson to adjust to what defenses have done to continue Lamar Jackson's maturation process. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into my Week 15 predictions. Stay tuned for that right here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment we discussed Baker and Lamar Jackson. We discussed them. We discussed, the Monday night game, big game between those two teams. I discussed both of the futures and what I think of them as quarterbacks moving forward. And I think both of them could have a bright future. There have been questions about them clearly this year about their performance and how they've played. But I think they're in good shape moving forward, and I think there's nothing to really worry about if you're those teams. I think you just got to ride the ship. You saw what both quarterbacks are capable of on Monday night, and so maybe that should give you more of a positive outlook on the potential future that you could have with those two players. But before we get into the Week 15 predictions, I just want to go ahead and tell you guys, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football, where you can keep up with us as we update, talk about everything football there, interact with you guys. We love talking to the people who make GSMC, which is you, the listener. So definitely don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football. So let's get into the games. And this week, we're going to start the Saturday game slate as we have Bills and Broncos to start off our Saturday game slate. Bills right now 10-3. Basically, if they win this game and Miami loses, they'll clinch the AFC East. Or they'll basically, for the most part, I believe, solidify it if they win. And so this game's going to be interesting. Denver's coming off a really good game for Drew Lock. He just had his biggest game of the year. 4 touchdowns, no picks. And Drew hasn't played like that the entire year. And so some people are wondering, again, against I believe it was against the Panthers, they're looking at it and thinking, well, is Drew Lock basically playing to save his job now as the starting quarterback at Denver? Because John Elway has a history of being willing to quickly move on from guys if they're just not cutting it. And so is this maybe Drew Lock trying to save himself? Hey, give me another chance next year? We'll have to see. Listen, we can sit here and say, well, Drew Lock didn't have the offseason that he was expecting to have, where he would have a full workouts, full training camp, and etc. We could make that argument, But here's the thing, too. With Vic Fangio having another down year, we don't know if he's even going to be head coach next year of the Broncos. And then the new regime come in there, and they may be like, yeah, Drew Lock, you're not it. So we'll have to see. But Buffalo's coming into this game riding a very big high, beating Pittsburgh, playing some of their best football. And if it wasn't for a Hail Mary, they'd be 7-0 in their last 7 games. So, they're playing really good football right now. They started off hot. They kind of slumped, and now it looks like they're going back up again. So they peaked, they fell, and now they're climbing back up. And so now Buffalo's looking like one of the most dangerous teams to go into the playoffs. Make a prediction in this game. I think I'm going to go with the Bills to win this game. I think they're going to win. I think this game could be closer to what people think. The one thing about Denver is they do still have a top 5 defense. They have remained a top 5 defense. They've always been competitive in a lot of their games because of their defense. And I think this may be one of those games they may be able to keep it close early, but Buffalo maybe makes some plays late and is able to take advantage. And then the last game of the Saturday night slate, we have the Carolina Panthers and the Green Bay Packers. Right now, Aaron Rodgers is on track to potentially win the MVP trophy. And, Packers are number 1 seed in the NFC. Again, this is another year where people think, are they a fraudulent number 1 seed? They're going to, we'll have to see. But if they win out, they'll get the number 1 spot because they have the tiebreaker on the Saints because they beat them earlier in the season. And I'm sure that's something they really, really want to have because that number 1 seed is extremely important to whoever gets it, knowing that everybody else will be playing instead of you. So, the Panthers are a team that a lot of people look at in the future as a team that will be a good team. They think Matt Rule and this team is, heading in the right direction. Teddy Bridgewater has played well. Christian McCaffrey's been injured a lot, so they weren't expecting their best running back to be, in and out of the lineup most of the year, mainly out of the lineup. But they've showed some things. They have some young players on defense that are getting better week to week. And so, this game is this is a game to me where we've seen Green Bay in some of these games sometimes struggle. Remember, they struggled against Jacksonville. But then they have those performances where they dominate teams like this. So we don't know with Green Bay what kind of team we're going to get in this game, but if I'm going to go ahead and make a prediction on it, I'm definitely going to think we're going to get the good Green Bay Packers in this game. I think they're going to come out, and I think they're going to end up winning the game. I think this may be a game where maybe first half it's competitive, but then Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers makes a couple plays late, or the second half that starts to extend the lead, and the Panthers are always having to catch up, and that usually is what the difference in the game will probably be. Then you have the Sunday games, and we're going to go right into it. We have Buccaneers and Falcons. So this game could go either way for me because the Falcons in their position right now, they're out of the playoffs. They just came off another crushing defeat. A lot of people are questioning if Matt Ryan's going to be the quarterback next year after that horrible performance he had against the LA Chargers, throwing 3 interceptions, 2 back-to-back after getting a turnover too. And Tampa right now is still trying to, basically establish themselves, get themselves right for the playoffs. The Falcons defense has played extremely well over the last 5 weeks. I believe they're only allowing 21 points a game. So they're playing very well. So defensively, they may be able to keep the Falcons in this game. The key to this game for the Falcons is offense. Can they score? Because I feel like this is a game that could be high scoring. And so they're going to have to be able to put some points up on the board. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. Tampa Bay, like I said, right now is playing better than the Falcons. And so that's very possible. And like I said, the Falcons' offense has been struggling. I think Tampa Bay last week kind of saw something that worked for them. They ran the football and got big plays over the top. I think that's kind of how they have to do it. Sometimes Bruce Arians likes to think, we don't have to run the football. Let's just go deep on these guys anyway. And I think, if you're Bruce and you took that bye week to really evaluate the offense, you kind of can see, okay, if we kind of run it with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette, and then we could get some big plays over the top to a Mike Evans, to a Chris Godwin, to a Scotty Miller, that's probably when our offense is most efficient for Brady. So I definitely think Tampa Bay is going to win this game this week. I just don't think the Falcons have a lot they're playing for as well right now, and I think that's what's going to lead to them losing this game, just because when you have a team playing for something, you're not necessarily playing for something. That can sometimes vary in certain players, and you don't know how each player is going to perform knowing that. So I'm going to go with Tampa Bay to win the game. We have Lions and Titans. Lions in a similar position where they technically still have a chance to make the playoffs, technically. But I don't think anybody's projecting it. If they lose this week, they'll be eliminated. So this is basically a must-win for Detroit against a Tennessee team who, another big game from Derrick Henry. It seems like Derrick Henry is playing like he did at the end of last year. Something about the end of years for Derrick Henry's allows him to play even better. It's like, but it makes sense because at the end of the year, football changes. You have to be able to run the football, pound and ground, pound the ball up the middle, wherever's blocking scheme you run. And you got to be able to get the tough yards. And Derrick Henry is bigger than most linebackers, so he can get those tough yards plus more. That's what makes him, I think a lot of people look at him as sometimes the best back in the league. Bigger than most players, but also can outrun a lot of guys. And, like I said, we know Tannehill, and if the offense is on track that week, we know that they have the capability of being a big play offense. Now, we all know Tennessee's, Achilles heel is going to be defense. They struggle to get after the passer. They may be able to get after Detroit this week, but if they give Matthew Stafford some time, Matthew Stafford could be able to do some things. Now, obviously, it'll be big this week to see if Kenny Golladay will finally return for Detroit. He's been out for a long time. They haven't had their best receiver mainly this entire year after signing that big contract extension before the year. DeAndre Swift did come back last week. He had a good performance in his return, so at least they still have him back, but Detroit has not been at full strength for a while, and we'll have to see if that maybe continues to linger and hurt them moving forward. But in this game, I'm definitely going to go with the Titans to win, and Detroit will be officially eliminated from the playoff picture. Then we have Cowboys and 49ers. This is an interesting game because the Cowboys are still in the division race, even though Washington is starting to win games. They're still in the division race. The 49ers still technically also have a chance to make the playoffs. So they're still in a must-win game. So both teams are playing for something. Even with their records, they're playing for something. San Francisco's favored to win this game. But I really don't know where this game's going to go. The 49ers still have a good defense. And we've seen the Cowboys against the good defenses this year struggle. They've struggled. If you can get after Andy Dalton, they don't really have much of a running game. So their offense could struggle in this game. But we also know San Francisco's offense is injury riddled. Nick Mullins can play well at times, struggle at other times. They just lost Deebo Samuel for the rest of the year. So, we don't know what we're going to get from San Francisco in this game. But, if I had to make a pick, I would go with San Francisco because I just think they have the better coaching staff. And this could be a game where Kyle Shanahan could establish coaching dominance and outcoach Mike McCarthy. And if he can do that, that might put him in position to get a win and technically keep San Fran in the playoff race. And then next we have Texans and Colts. Last time these two teams played, very close game. Houston has played better. They've lost a couple of games after winning. They're losing. Honestly, Miami's happy probably every time that happens because that gives them a better chance to get a higher draft pick. The Colts came off a big win, a dominating win over the Raiders last week. Jonathan Taylor had a big day. Colts right now have a one-game lead on Miami in the Baltimore. I don't see why they couldn't keep that lead up this week. I expect this, because these two teams I think play each other well. I expect this to still be a competitive game again. But I would definitely go with the Colts to win this game. I think the Colts are going to come out of this game successfully and be able to win it and be able to continue their flow going into the playoffs. And the last game before we go to break, Bears and Vikings. Bears winning last week still have a chance to win, get into the playoffs. Going against a Vikings team whose playoff hits kind of felt like kind of deflated when Dan Bailey missed 4 kicks last week. And I really, at this point in the season, you're really like, do I really want to change my kicker literally right before the playoffs? But I think if you're Mike Zimmer, it definitely hurts you knowing that, dang, in the last 2 weeks, he's missed 7 kicks combined. And so now it starts to make you wonder on field goals. 4th and 3, we're at the 35. Okay, if you have an elite kicker, okay, let's do it. Or if you want to be aggressive, go for it. But now it's not even like, oh, we have an elite kicker. It's, I don't know if my kicker can make it. So we might just have to go for it because I don't know if he can make it. And so that's a dilemma you don't want to be in. Now, I'm still going to go with Minnesota win this game over Chicago. But, I mean, is it possible to say it may depend on the leg of Dan Bailey again this week? We'll have to see. But that's all the time we have here for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to finish out my Week 15 predictions. So stay tuned for that right here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, we started my Week 15 predictions. Now we're going to continue my Week 15 predictions right now. But before we do that, I would like to remind you guys, whatever platform you're listening to GSMC Football Podcast on, don't forget to leave a review or subscribe, because we definitely appreciate all of the subscriptions, all of the reviews, comments, how I can be a better host. Always open to feedback from you guys. So don't forget to do that. Like I said, whatever platform you're listening to us on GSMC. And also don't forget to follow us on Twitter at GSMC_football as well. So now, we're going to continue with my Week 15 predictions. And first game we're going to get into is the Washington football team versus the Seattle Seahawks. Now, if you remember a couple weeks ago, Seattle played an NFC East team in the Giants and got upset. Now they're playing a team that is basically, you could maybe even say, built the same. But I think they're better on the D-line. Remember, really, the Giants had a good D-line, but really it was the front four, the same four guys. Remember, the Washington football team has like 6-7 guys. And so Seattle's weakness is their offensive line. So this could be one of those games where you could see it exploited again. And the only difference I think of this game is that I think Washington's secondary isn't as good as the New York secondary. So maybe they can still take advantage of the secondary if they can hold up for Russell Wilson. But Washington's coming into this game not sure who their starting quarterback is going to be. Alex Smith went out the game last week with a calf. Dwayne Haskins is now the guy until Alex Smith gets back. Now that, literally, everybody in Washington and a fan of Washington is probably scared for their lives because they're like, could Dwayne Haskins cost us a playoff spot with the positioning we got him because of Alex Smith? Ron Rivera has already came out and said he is confident in Dwayne Haskins and thinks he can get the job done. And we don't know if maybe him sitting on the bench, watching Alex Smith, learning from Alex Smith, how it could affect his game and make him realize maybe some of the things he was doing that wasn't working, he could change and improve now. So I'm very open to giving him a chance here. And so I'm going to go ahead and make this my upset pick of the week. I'm going with Washington to defeat the Seattle Seahawks. I think it'll be another close game, but I just think that Dwayne Haskins might have a better game than some people think he may have. Now, I could be burned on this, and then I could come back next show, and then it's just like, whoa, this man did absolutely terrible. But I think at this very moment in time, Dwayne is in a good position right now, and this is his chance. This may be his last chance to show this Washington team, front office, coaching staff, give me a chance. I can be that guy. But I'm going with Washington to win the game. Next, we got Patriots and Dolphins. This is going to be a very interesting game. Dolphins at this point basically need to win out to get the playoff spot. Just because you look at Baltimore's ending schedule, and also because there's just no way they can clinch before that, unless Baltimore just falls off.
I couldn't hear.
Unless Washington just falls off a cliff. So that's going to be the big thing moving forward. But did you know that the Patriots are, I believe when I checked it, they are is it 15-0? I believe they're 15-0. They may be 15. I don't know. I could be wildly off a number. I did some research before it, but basically they're undefeated against rookie quarterbacks since 2015. They actually might be 8-0, but they're undefeated against rookie quarterbacks since 2015. So Tua is coming into this game going against a defense that is considered is still a good defense. He has injuries to Devontae Parker, Grant, Gesicki. You got one of the best coaches in the league. Now you got Brian Flores, who's learned from this man, who knows what this man does. So maybe that can help Tua and the team. I think this could be another low-scoring game. I think you pretty much know that the Patriots struggled to pass the football. So your main focus of your Miami is to control the running game. So this game's going to be low scoring. The key is going to be Tua in that defense. When there's a play there to be made, does Tua make the play? Because he has to in this type of game. These are pressure games. This is a good learning experience for Tua. Brian Flores said this will be a good challenge for him. And we'll see. And I'm going to go with Miami to win this game because they have to win this game. Then next we have Jags and Ravens. Now you see why Miami has to win out. Because now Gardner Minshew is coming back this week. The return of Gardner Minshew this week. He's going to start over Mike Glennon. So we're going to have to see, does that potentially give Jacksonville a better chance? We don't know. Jacksonville's a team that may be looking to spoil. They're playing spoiler right now. Even though at the same time they really don't want to win because they're trying to at least keep themselves within range of giving Trevor Lawrence, and just in case the Jets somehow pull off an upset in the next 3 games. But I expect Baltimore to come into this game off that Monday night win. See, the thing is, a game like that, a highly emotional game like that, sometimes teams go on an emotional high, and then they come down, and then they don't play the same. Especially if they're going against a good team. Well, now this game could be a trap game because you're going against Jacksonville. You're coming off an emotional high. You're like, we're better than these guys. And so you could see the Ravens struggle early, but I think second half they'll pull away, and this game will be a large margin by the end. Because I don't know if Jacksonville has the guns to compete and stay close with Baltimore. So I'm going with Baltimore to win the game here. And, I think they're going to continue their playoff push. Then you have Jets and Rams. Now this game, you would think easy blowout for the Rams. You're going against a Jets team who looks like they're bad at all levels. You got one of the best defenses in the league in the Rams. Jared Goff should have a good game this week. It'd actually be kind of crazy if he had one of his worst games of the year against the Jets, because the Jets have been close in games recently. The Jets have played better in games recently. So they're clearly, this is that time of the year where players on a team like this who could go 0-16, they play even better. First, to obviously make sure that they can at least say, hey, I'm a good player, I could stay, or I look good on another team. But at the same time, don't want to say I was a part of an 0-16 year. So they're trying everything they can to make sure that's not the case. But I think the Rams are going to be too much in this game, and I think they're going to dominate. So I think Rams are going to win. Then we have Eels and Cardinals, a very interesting matchup. Jalen Hurts versus Kyler Murray. Jalen Hurts coming off his first win of the season. People are wondering, if he continues to play well and continues to win games for the Eagles, will that mean the end of Carson Wentz in Philadelphia? Will Philadelphia have to make that inevitable decision to either trade Carson Wentz or cut Carson Wentz? That's going to be the question. It's kind of funny how things come full circle, because it's crazy. They drafted Jalen Hurts. Everybody was so confused. Carson Wentz played well last year down the stretch with injuries, got him to the playoffs, everything. You thought they just gave him a new deal. Why would they draft Jalen Hurts? What's the purpose? What's the point? Why would they do that? And now it's crazy now to see Jalen Hurts where he is now and seeing how Carson Wentz has came down. And now it's like, this actually was a good draft pick, because now Wentz is falling apart and we have a guy who could step in and be the next guy. That's why sometimes you can never question the decisions of certain teams. Like, I'm not sure if the Eagles sat here and said, we think Wentz was going to be like this, or else because they wouldn't have given him that money. But it kind of is a blessing in disguise knowing, hey, we kind of have another guy we can throw in there and say, hey, he could be the next future of our franchise. And so, that's an interesting, situation on their side. And the Cardinals won a game last week. Kyler Murray looked a little bit closer to regular Kyler Murray. Still not there yet offensively. Still, there's some struggles. They're still in the 7th spot in the NFC, still trying to maintain it, trying to, keep themselves in that spot. I think they'll win this week, but it'll be interesting to see this quarterback matchup. It'll be interesting to see how Kyler Murray does in this type of matchup, but I think they're going to come out with a victory. And I truly do believe that. And so then we have Chiefs and Saints, one of the big matchups of the week. I think Chiefs are going to win this game. I think the Saints Though, don't look at these last two games and think, oh, they're 10-4. Oh, boy. It looks like they're done. They're finished. Now, this does give Tampa Bay technically a chance to win the division. Because if the Saints lost out and Tampa Bay won out, they'd win. But that's not going to happen. But I just think we don't know if Drew's going to play this week. And I don't think a Taysom Hill-led Saints offense can keep up with the Chiefs. This would be a big game for the Saints defense if they were going to win this game. But I think Patrick Mahomes, we've seen, you may be able to stop him for a quarter, maybe even a half. But he's going to get his. He's going to make plays, and they're going to score points. So I think they're going to come out with a victory because of that. And then our Sunday night game, we have Cleveland and New York. That's going to be an interesting matchup. Cleveland has to be careful a little bit here. Remember, Baltimore has the tiebreaker. If Baltimore wins and Cleveland loses, now the playoffs are all shifted upside down. Because now, it's not Miami who could be out, it's Cleveland. Because they're the ones who don't have the tiebreaker. And so, Cleveland needs to make sure they get back on track this week. Giants are going to be a tough matchup. That D-line can get after Baker Mayfield. Listen, the Giants came off the worst game of the year, too. Joe Judge is from the New England type of mold. I'm sure when the Patriots had a bad game, the Patriots always responded. And this would be a good way to see how will the Giants respond after having a bad game. I think Joe Judge is going to have these guys ready. I'm going to go with Cleveland to win, but another potential upset alert game here because, like I said, Giants are playing better. They're still in the NFC East. They have a lot to play for. Where the Browns, coming off that highly emotional game, losing, we don't know where they're going to be at when this game comes. And then the last game, our Monday night game, Steelers and Bengals, not a lot to talk about here. Steelers should dominate this game. No Burrow. This is a game where if you're playing Steelers, this would be the fantasy game you want to play the Steelers defense. The big thing you want to just see here is how the offense looks. Because they've struggled the last couple of weeks. This is a Bengals defense that's not that good, so you're expecting them to kind of do what they did the first time they played the Bengals. If they don't, it's going to create more questions about their offense because that's what's holding them back right now. They're being too Ben Roethlisberger dependent. It's hurting them. And so they got to really maybe try to establish a running game this week and gain more confidence. These are confidence-building games where if we're able to run the ball, even if it's against them, a Bengals team, it establishes some confidence. It gives players confidence, offensive line confidence. Okay, we can do this. We can run the ball. We don't have to be Big Ben dependent. Offensive coordinator is more confident in play calling if he wants to have more of an even balance attack. So I'm going to go Pitt this game, but this would be a good game for them to really get things back on track. And those are my Week 15 predictions right there for you. So hopefully, I have a good week of predictions this week and everything goes well. But that's all the time we have for this segment. Coming up next, we're going to get into the biggest college games of the weekend. Plus, we're going to talk about the college football playoff. So stay tuned for all that here and more on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Football Podcast. Last segment, I finished up my Week 15 predictions on all of the games. Really good slate of NFL games this weekend, man. This is usually the part of the season, man. Everybody's kind of like, okay, eyes to the screen. Playoff pushes, who's going to win, who's going to lose, big upsets, who's going to play spoiler, all that. So, really, really, really just a great time for football in general. Then you got, the college football season has their championship games, and then their bowl games, and then the playoff, and this next month is going to be a football fan's greatest joy every single year. But speaking of championship games, we have a lot this week as this is championship weekend. And we're going to go through the championship games and discuss who's going to win and who is going to lose in these games. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So first game, we have Oregon and USC. If you remember, earlier this week, Washington, with COVID concerns, had to pull out of the championship game, and so Oregon was inserted. USC 5-0 right now. Pac-12 clearly affected by the fact that they started the season so late, kept them from getting into the playoff. We don't know if they were able to play 3 more games, especially with the way the conference isn't that strong this year, if it would have really changed, if maybe a team like a USC could have got in. But with this type of change, I expect a team like USC to come out, win this game. I think they're going to play well. I think that they're in a good position right now to be successful. And, you know, it'll be a good cap to the year for USC to go 6-0. They're still going to play in a bowl game. Could go 7-0. Like I said, this is still going to be a weird year, I would say. You know, it's going to be a weird year for a lot of guys because it's just like we only played 7 games. And it's going to be a lot of people who probably feel like, man, this was a regular season, man, and we could play the amount of games we could have played and da-da-da-da-da. Where would we have sitted? Where would we have been? Would we have been as good as we thought we were, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be probably the big thing that people would definitely wonder about. So, but I think USC's going to win this game against Oregon. They're 3-point favorites, so pretty much I do expect it to be a little bit more of a higher scoring game, but a close game. But I think USC's going to make some plays late and be able to win the game. Then we have Northwestern, Ohio State. Northwestern 6-1 in the year versus the 5-0 Buckeyes. There have been some questions about Ohio State because they've only played 5 games this year. And they're the 4th team right now in the playoff, which I'll get more deeper into. So some people are questioning, should they be in the top 4 if that's the case? Now, this week against Northwestern, this game could be a game where if the committee's still thinking about maybe saying they only played 6 games, Texas A&M's played 9 games, 10 games, and they're only 1 losses to number 1 Alabama. You know, can we sit here and legitimately say that Ohio State should be in over Texas A&M? You know, so Ohio State's going to have to look impressive. They're favored by 20. And that's what I think has to happen. They have to blow out Northwestern to really make the committee be like, okay, with that performance, we're going to let them stay. If they are in a close slugfest with Northwestern, the committee could penalize them for that. I'm going to go with Ohio State to win, but they got to make it. This could be a game where style points matter. How you beat a team will determine what the committee thinks. And I think that's something I think sometimes is underestimated by the playoff committee. Sometimes style points is important. Then we have Oklahoma and Iowa State. Iowa State is 6th right now in the ranking. You know, so they're only 2 spots away. So let's just say this happens. Iowa State has a path to get in. Let's say Ohio State loses. And then let's say Texas A&M loses. If Iowa State beats a number 10 Oklahoma team, that's a good win. Iowa State would be in the... There's no way you can sit here and justify saying you're going to allow a Florida team unless they beat out... Like if chaos happened this weekend and Alabama lost to Florida, and then the 2 other teams I said lost, then you could justify Florida and Iowa State both being in there. Or even though you highly doubt they're going to take out Alabama, so probably Florida. They'll have Florida jump Iowa State because they have a more impressive win. But I think this game could go either way. And Oklahoma's the favorites in this game. But I'm an upset kind of guy. I feel like I have to have an upset pick. So I'm going to go with Iowa State to upset Oklahoma. Listen, if Iowa State somehow came out here and blew out the Sooners, as the committee, you might have to sit here and say, hey, they played just as many games as Texas A&M, and they've beaten a top 10 team. We may have to give them the credit they deserve. Then you have the Sun Belt Championship. I know it's the Sun Belt guys, but they're important, okay? You have number 19, the Ragin' Cajuns of Louisiana versus number 12, Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina coming off that big win against BYU. Now has another chance to get another good win against Louisiana. To me, I'm going to go with Coastal Carolina. I think it's going to be a close game. Coastal Carolina is going to probably feel like they've had one of the better seasons, or probably the best season in their entire history ever, since being in the FBS and Division I. Beating BYU, beating Louisiana, 2 top teams in their conference. It kind of sucks, though, for Group of 5 teams when you beat other Group of 5 ranked teams, because it feels like the committee doesn't value that much. But it's still an impressive win to you, and you feel like we did still beat a good team, as they should. But I'm going to go with Coastal Carolina here. Then we got Clemson and Notre Dame. This is the big game, man. Like, if Notre Dame wins, that could mean the end of Clemson in the playoff. They legitimately, 2 losses to the same team, and then you got 1 loss, Texas A&M sitting outside. And then Texas A&M plays Tennessee, and we all projecting to beat Tennessee. Clemson has to win this game, but if Clemson wins, now the question is, what is the committee going to do with Notre Dame? Would you potentially have them be jumped by a Texas A&M? Would you potentially only swap spots? What if a team like Alabama loses? Where do you drop Alabama? Because like I said, I think everybody pretty much projects, regardless if they lose, unless they lose in blowout fashion, they're going to be in the top 4 regardless. So you already have 1 spot filled. Clemson wins. Let's say they upset Notre Dame. They're in. So now your spots are between Texas A&M, Notre Dame, Ohio State. Let's say Ohio State wins. You would think they would keep them in. So now you only have 1 spot available for Texas A&M, Florida, and Notre Dame. Would you say Florida being Alabama puts them in? We don't know. So I'm going to go with Clemson to get their win back because I think Trevor Lawrence is going to be the difference in this game. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And then we're going to get to the Alabama-Florida game because this is a big game. Now, Florida's coming off a terrible loss last week. If they hadn't lost last week, they would have been in position to make the playoff for sure. But now it's like 2 losses. If you beat Alabama, you have to give them some actual conversation. They just beat our number 1 team, who's looked dominant the entire year. We have to give them consideration to get in. But it would have been easier if they had won last week than now. Because basically Florida knows we have to win to even have a chance. Alabama knows they're in regardless. But Alabama still plays hard in these games. They still want to be dominant. Nick Saban's done a great job. Mac Jones had a great year. Devontae Smith has just been dominating defenses left and right. People thought Eric Weddle going down, you can switch the entire defense on Devontae Smith. It feels like he's gotten even better since Weddle's been gone. And so, I'm going to go with Alabama to win. I hope this is a close game. People don't think it's going to be a close game because Alabama is 17-point favorites. But, Alabama, I think, honestly, COVID year is meant for teams like Alabama to win. Because it's just, they're always going to be the most prepared team. They're always going to be the most talented team. This is one of those years your talent can really just take over. And I think Alabama is going to probably end up winning the entire COVID year. And so on and so forth. So, we're at a point with the committee now, entering those last weeks, basically. Basically, you would think next week's list will probably be the final list for the top 25, the top 4. And I've just talked about through some of the predictions, some of the potential things that could happen this coming, top 4 ranking show. If teams lose, and then what position would you be put in? But I want to go back to what I was saying about Ohio State, how they were considering flipping him in Texas A&M because of the games. Because one thing the committee has to think about when making a decision like this is how important is the regular season? You got a Ohio State team that barely, outside of playing Indiana, hasn't played anybody. Really, they haven't. Now they get another good, they beat Northwestern, hey, that's another good ranked team win on their schedule. But then you got Texas A&M, who I think universally SEC still is respected as the best conference, and they've played more games. And so you feel like Texas A&M has gone against maybe a higher degree of teams or better teams. They did beat Florida. That was Florida's first loss, was Florida. So they have a number 7 Florida on their win, which is better than any win Ohio State has. And they've played more games. And they lost to the number 1 team. So I can understand why the committee is saying, should we consider Texas A&M more? Because remember, Texas A&M playing this week. They're playing Tennessee. They still have a game they're playing. So they're adding another game on. They dominate this week. It's like, they may have an argument. Are you really going to allow a 6-0 Ohio State team whose best win is Northwestern, or at the time Indiana because they were a top 10 team, even though the committee does not view Indiana the way they view a Florida? Or are you going to put in a Texas A&M team who best win was a number 7 Florida team and best loss was number 1 Alabama? That's why the SEC always has 3 or 4 teams lingering around the top 4, because their schedules are usually tougher. There's a better chance to get a very key win. Where Ohio State could have potential, the weakness or the weak Big Ten this year could actually affect them. So remember, if Penn State was what they were supposed to be this year, that would have been a big time win. So you could have sat here and said, okay, so now you got 3 good wins. So we can sit here and make an argument. They've played some good teams and they haven't. But remember, Penn State is terrible. So that looks like just a team they should have blew out in the first place. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the committee puts everything together to me, because they got to make sure with this COVID year and everybody's schedule being different, they put the best 4 teams in there based off the eye test. And can they sit here and say, oh, if we play Texas A&M and Ohio State on a neutral field, do we really think Ohio State would beat Texas A&M? That's the question they have to ask themselves at the end of the day. If the answer is yes, then you put Ohio State in. If the answer is no, then I think you might need to make that flip. And that's just saying that Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame all stay in the top 4 regardless of what happens this weekend. And you have to decide who gets that 4th spot. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But that's all the time we have here for this segment, or actually for the show. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast. Thank you for letting me be part of your day. Don't forget to listen to our other amazing podcasts here at the GSMC Podcast Network. This is your host, Brice, signing out, saying have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.